Good morning, good afternoon, greetings, wherever you are. Thank you so much for joining us today for this penultimate session in the Sisters Empowering Women series hosted by UISG. My name is Julia, and I'm the communication strategist and also the project coordinator for Sisters Advocating Globally, the advocacy initiative launched last year by UISG in partnership with the Global Solidarity Fund. It's been my great pleasure and my privilege to organise this event with help, of course, from my colleagues at UISG, and I'm very excited for you to hear from our speakers. Sister Sheila Kinsey will be welcoming you officially in just one moment, so I don't want to take up too much of our time. I just want to remind us before we start that the title of today's event is Advocacy, Linking Local to Global. One of the major and ongoing challenges of this project is understanding how we can support the advocacy of Catholic sisters on a global scale and how we can connect it with individuals and organizations from the international community to work together on the Sustainable Development Goals without losing our link to the local action of sisters at a grassroots level. So we're going to hear from today's 6 speakers about the role and meaning of advocacy in the life of women religious. We'll have some time for questions from you, and I'll also be sending a short form asking for your contact details so that if you like, you can sign up to receive our updates. I'll conclude with the quote that we've chosen to inspire this particular event from Fratelli Tutti 23. The organization of societies worldwide is still far from reflecting clearly that women possess the same dignity and identical rights as men. We say one thing with words, but our decisions and reality tell another story. So our first speaker today is Sister Sheila Kinsey. Thank you, Sister Sheila, for joining us. Sister Sheila is a member of the Franciscan Sisters, Daughters of the Sacred Hearts of Jesus and Mary. She's involved in action and advocacy on a huge range of issues, including poverty, human rights, migration, anti-trafficking, peace building, environmental protection, non-violence, and sexual abuse. Since 2015, Sister Sheila is the Executive Co-Secretary for the Justice, Peace, and Integrity of Creation Joint Commission of the UISG and USG. She also serves as the coordinator of UISG's initiative Sowing Hope for the Planet, which promotes the integration of Laudato Si into the personal and communal lives of religious congregations. And alongside her work at UISG, Sister Sheila also serves on the steering committees of the Global Catholic Climate Movement and the Catholic Nonviolence Initiative. Most recently, she was appointed by Pope Francis as a member of the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development, where she's part of the COVID-19 Commission's Integral Ecology Task Force. So without further ado, Sister Sheila, welcome and thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Julia, for inviting me to be a part of this wonderful session. Really, you can see from the lineup of all the presenters who are going to follow me, what you're in for is something truly fantastic and so enriching for us as religious to be able to be together and to share this time. So I'd like to share my screen so that I can move ahead with some things that I would like to say, you know, in terms of empowering women and just raising our voices up. And as you know, Sowing Hope for the Planet has its purpose to actualize the Laudato Si goals. So this is a way that we identify ourselves on the JPIC Commission and the work that we do in justice, peace, and integrity of creation. And we say it this way: JPIC is the conscious prayer and sacred action to transform the world in the spirit of the gospel through lives of justice, peace, and care for the integrity of creation. So we're about promoting the kingdom of God, and the quality of our presence is important. So it talks about what we do and how we do it. And in the same way, when the Superiors General met in May of 2019, they also gave us a sense of direction with this vision statement, which they accepted by acclamation at that time. And it's this: we commit ourselves to both personal and communal conversion, and we wish to move forward together in an orchestrated and coordinated response in listening to the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. as we go forth as instruments of hope in the heart of the world. And so even looking at the advocacy work, it's the work of the Holy Spirit. This is what we see when moving forward with sowing hope for the planet. And the word advocate can mean a way of describing the Holy Spirit working through us and moving us to give our voice in support and defense of human rights through seeing situations, assessing them, judging them through discerning and transforming action. And this was the quote that helped contextualize this session for today. And so we really want to see in picture form here where our women are and how we are engaged in our movement to try to make a difference in their lives. And the speakers following me will certainly give us plenty of food to think about and to want to be engaged in as well. So what are some of the characteristics then that we talk about, qualities to consider as advocates? Co-responsibility in creating and putting into place new processes and changes. Social friendship and universal fraternity necessarily call for an acknowledgement of the worth of every human person, always and everywhere, both from Fratelli Tutti and certainly about our efforts moving forward. And we can say this also in another way, in terms of kindness. And that kindness is rooted in so many of these things. And it tells esteem and respect for others. Once kindness becomes a culture within society, it transforms lifestyles, relationships, and the ways ideas are discussed. It opens new paths where hostility and conflict would be prevailing. And this is what we're talking about. These are some examples of making a difference in the world, in transforming people's lives. And it all is about promoting the kingdom of God. It's the wellspring of human dignity and fraternity that is at the root of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And as religious and as women involved in making a difference in the world, this certainly speaks to our hearts. So what is this way forward that we're talking about? And it's the power of networking, of being together. There's a dynamic in working together. And as Julie spoke earlier, it's about using the funds from this grant, the Global Solidarity Fund, to really enable religious to have some training on advocacy techniques and our way of being and presenting ourselves in a way that we can have influence with some decisions that need to be made. We also have in our Sowing Hope for the Planet, we've developed a survey that's gone out at the beginning of this week. This is through the course on promoting Laudato Si in your congregations. And we're asking for what are some of the campaigns that religious are involved in? What are some of the direct services, how they reach out to others, and where are their partners? So we're trying to gather that data so we can begin to plan in a systematic way, how can we help each other make a difference? So it's a request for the advocacy efforts in all of the areas that are listed in the Laudato Si goals. So truly, it's a way of connecting locally and globally, helping us really make a difference in the places that we serve. So religious life is about being prophetic. That's what we're called upon. Often Pope Francis asks us to raise that up where we are. And how do we look at that? It's religious communities are in the forefront of the transition, helping people move to have a better life. They are also helping others to make the choices that they need to make according to their charisms. That's the strong point of us as religious, moving from our charisms. In this way, linking local and global. We are so well connected to the North and the South, and we want to be able to make a difference in the realities of those who are affected by the way we serve. And in fact, when we talk about the platform going forward, religious are called to lead because we are in all of those different areas. So we have these Laudato Si goals, which was a way of putting into practice what is being said in the Laudato Si encyclical itself. And these are the goals that are being talked about. Response to the cry of the earth, the cry of the poor, ecological economics, a simple lifestyle, ecological education, ecological spirituality, and community engagement, participatory action. That will be the last one, which we will be leading today in order to address some of the other areas. It's about being interconnected. And as you can see, back on May 25th, the Laudato Si platform has been launched, and we're trying to promote that. It's a way of pulling into the work that we've been already doing around these goals, but now embracing it as a church in a wider arena with other sectors that are also involved in promoting these goals. And how are we doing this kind of work together is through the constellation structure. So when we sent out this survey, we're asking those who participate to say, can we map what you're doing on our map, which we have on the Sowing Hope for the Planet, for others to see. It's about the public witness, not only to see, but how can we learn from one another? How can we interconnect our ideas to make them even stronger? That by stick, we're going to make a bundle, a voice, a strength that we can count on others to be with us. And it's an important effort for us, this survey is to help us listen to the grassroots so that we can work together to integrate all of the levels to be effective. So everyone matters. All of this is part of the plan going forward. And so this is how it will look. On Sowing Hope for the Planet, there is a section in the goals place where we have already done some indications of what's happening in the constellations. And this information is shared by the Superior Generals. Not all of those areas are listed, so we still need to work on the map to have all of that to be complete. But it is this constellation structure that we will then use with the map below it to say, okay, what area are we going to be working on now? Is it going to be plastics? Is it going to be divestment? Is it something with human trafficking? We want to honor what's ever taking place, not to take away from any of the work already being done by Talitha Kum and the work for refugees and migrants, but to show we're working together, that we're honoring all of the work that's taken place. So it's a way of putting together on this map what the religious are campaigning for, what things are happening to give direct service to relate to human needs, to human rights that we talk about, and how can we work together to strengthen that message? How can we evaluate the work that's being done when our politicians and say, I'm doing this, or maybe a corporation would say, I'm really being socially responsible. I'm building a school here, or I'm taking care of staff housing this way. Well, let's take pictures. Let's find out what they're doing. And so we can share with one another what's taken place and how we can certainly help one another to do the best we can. And so this is my thank you to you for this wonderful work that you're doing. This is the website for Sowing Hope for the Planet. Please visit it if you have not already done so. We have many persons that are a part of that, but we need all of us to work together. And so with just the kind of introduction of letting you know what's happening with Sowing Hope for the Planet, I am so happy now to embrace the following speakers who will be sharing with us the wonderful work that they're already doing. So thank you so much for this time and opportunity.
Thank you so much, Sister Sheila, for opening this encounter for us on such inspirational terms and yet at the same time such concrete terms. And thank you for grounding us as well in the conceptual space and the spiritual space that we're sharing here today. The next speaker that we've invited to share the space is Sister Eilish Koh. Sister Eilish was born and raised in Dublin, in Ireland, and she's been a religious sister of charity for 60 years. Most of her religious life has been spent in teaching. She's taught primary school and secondary school in Ireland and secondary school in Zambia and Botswana as well. Her subjects were English language and literature and religious education. Her qualifications include an MA in Classical Spirituality, an MA in Applied Christian Spirituality, a higher diploma in Education, and a postgraduate diploma in Dispute and Conflict Resolution. Since retiring from teaching, Sister Eilish has facilitated retreats for lay people and creative writing groups. Her experience in the area of combating human trafficking includes teaching English to women who've been trafficked into Ireland, outreach to women in street prostitution, and awareness-raising activities with anti-trafficking networks such as APT and Renate. Sister Eilish, thank you so much for joining us today. I just want to remind our speakers before I pass the microphone to you that we're being translated simultaneously into 7 languages, and some of these are relay translations. So one of the translators may be translating from a translation. We need to allow a little bit of time for jet lag. So please do remember to speak slowly and clearly. Thank you, Sister Eilish. Welcome, and over to you.
Okay. Well, good afternoon from Dublin. Julia has already told you I am Sister Eilish Koh, and thank you for inviting me to introduce today's event. I am honored to have been asked to do this. Our theme for the day is Sisters Empowering Women, with reference to our Holy Father, Pope Francis' letter, Fratelli Tutti. Empowering is a very interesting word, defined in the Oxford Dictionary as giving strength and confidence to. When we empower someone, we give that person strength and confidence to do something. As sisters, we are called to empower people to live their lives fully, becoming the persons God intended them to be. And over the years, we have done this in education, in social work, in advocacy, in nurturing creativity, and many other ways. We take to heart the words of Jesus, "I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." We work and campaign against anything which would lessen the human rights and dignity of our brothers and sisters. We empower others because we ourselves have been empowered and continue to be so. Jesus told Peter that once he, Peter, had been strengthened, he was to strengthen his brothers and sisters. We know that we too have been empowered for a purpose, and that is to empower others. Let us look first at how and by whom we are empowered. We are empowered by our religious community and our lay colleagues who have faith in us, encourage and support us, and pray for us. Thanks to them, we have the strength to go out to others, especially those most in need, using the same strength that we ourselves have received. We are empowered by the writings and example of our congregational founders, Mary Ward, Mary Aikenhead, St. Vincent de Paul, Mother Euphrates, and many others. We are empowered by the example of the great religious women in history. Catherine of Siena, Teresa of Avila, Josephine Battista, and also women like Dorothy Day, Edwina Gately, and Helena Maleno. We have drawn strength and inspiration from reading about these great women and reflecting on their words and example. Contemporary writers such as Sandra Schneiders, Elizabeth Johnson, and Joan Chichester have enabled us to reflect on our experience in the light of the Gospels and to go out to put our inspiration into action. Our world today is in a sad state, held in the grip of the COVID-19 pandemic. When disaster strikes, it is the most vulnerable in society who suffer most. The poor, the widow, the orphan, and the stranger in the land, as the prophet Isaiah pointed out so many years ago. All across the world, sisters and their associates are involved in hospitals and clinics and in the homes of the poor, bringing hope and consolation and helping to preserve precious lives. We try to the best of our ability to empower these workers on the front lines by responding to appeals to share our supplies of vaccines and other medical necessities so that they may continue their work on behalf of us all. In our security, we are called to reach out to those whose lives are threatened at this time. Alongside COVID, deeply embedded in every country of the world, the scourge of human trafficking, modern-day slavery, continues to destroy lives. Many of us have been working to combat this evil, using all means at our disposal to help eradicate it. Yet, as Valentine Ritchie of OSC said recently, no country has defeated trafficking. We are just triaging the most evident symptoms of the disease rather than treating the disease itself. This is very discouraging. And more than ever, we need our networks to keep on working and empowering one another to find new and better ways to bring this evil disease out of the shadows where it devours the lives of the most vulnerable and expose it to the healing light of a community informed and determined to eradicate it. I am empowered by the dedication and consistency of the members of Renata and Salwadi and Talitha Koh and other networks working against human trafficking, who continue even in the winter snows of Eastern Europe and the sweltering heat of India and Africa to provide shelter and food and education and medical care to people affected by human trafficking. Our Holy Father points out, and we are well aware, that the organization of societies worldwide is still far from reflecting clearly that women possess the same dignity and identical rights as men. We say one thing with our words, but our decisions and realities tell another story. Who is going to remedy this? Pope Francis says, we must not expect everything from those who govern us, for that would be childish. We have the space we need for co-responsibility in creating and putting into place new processes and changes. Where should we start? I believe we should start with ourselves. Each woman resolving to take the first step in creating a new order, beginning in her own heart, being open to new thinking. We can start from below and case by case act at the most concrete and local levels, and then expand to the farthest reaches of our countries and the world, Pope Francis says. Here is a concrete example from my own experience. After a celebration in the parish, the coffee room was very untidy and the floor was littered with papers and crumbs. The parish priest arrived and observed that the floor was in an awful state. I immediately began to clean. A young woman who was also present said to me, he said the floor was dirty and you immediately began to clean. When I asked her what I should have done, she responded, you should have told him to clean the floor himself. I couldn't imagine myself doing that. I noticed she didn't do it either. The incident stayed in my mind for years. I often think about it and wonder what a better response might have been, because I realized that the young woman was making a very valid point. I eventually came to the conclusion that I might have responded by saying, okay, I'll sweep the floor if you clear the tables. This way, I would have shown my willingness to help, but was not falling into the role we women resist, that we are there to do only the menial tasks for the priest. I might have formed a partnership, a shared responsibility, without any anger or bitterness or resentment. So now I catch myself when I fall into the old way. It takes time to root out old ways of thinking and behaving. Example empowers others towards this model of shared responsibility. Reflection shows us where we have gone back to the old model. The time has come to form a new way of doing things, being creative, forming a new partnership with men, a new alliance, a new arrangement, a new covenant. I will do this if you do that. We are disciples of the humble, loving, welcoming Jesus, who promised us that we would be given power from on high. The Holy Spirit of Father and Son will continue to empower us to be sisters and brothers to all. Sorelle e Fratelli Tutti. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Eilish, so much. I have to confess to our audience that I had the privilege of reading your presentation in advance of today, and I have to say, I've been thinking about it all week. I was really touched by this call to co-responsibility as an entry point for action to start building a better world. And I find it a really inspirational and a very optimistic way as well to frame some very complex challenges. So thank you.
Thank you, Julia.
Next up, we're honored to welcome today Sister Norma Pimentel, who's joining us from Texas in the United States. Sister Norma is a sister with the Missionaries of Jesus and a licensed professional counselor. As Executive Director of Catholic Charities of the Rio Grande Valley, she oversees the charitable arm of the Diocese of Brownsville, providing oversight of different ministries and programs in the areas of emergency assistance, housing assistance, counseling, and pregnancy care. Previously, Sister Norma was a director at Casa Oscar Romero, a refugee shelter in San Benito and later Brownsville for Central Americans who were fleeing war-torn countries in the 1980s. In 2014, Sister Norma was instrumental in organizing community resources to respond to the surge of Central Americans seeking asylum in the United States and setting up humanitarian respite centers in McAllen and in Brownsville, Texas. In March 2015, she spoke at the UN headquarters in New York City at the invitation of the Permanent Observer of the Holy See to the United Nations. And her most recent recognition is being named as one of Time's 100 most influential people of 2020. So without further ado, welcome, Sister Norma, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to be here today with you and to speak. Muchas gracias. Women of today, I am certain that you will agree with me that we must continue our work to speak out as we are advocates for social change, one that will transform our world to uphold fundamental human rights for all people. Speaking out, denouncing all sorts of shame for humanity, as our Holy Father names, as we see today, like poverty, hunger, human trafficking, and all forms of destruction to human life. As advocates of today, we are defenders of human dignity, working together for the common good. We are heralds of truth, of justice, and of mercy that bring about peace to our world, as our Holy Father Pope Francis invites us to promote in his letter, Fratelli Tutti. My story at the border of South Texas, next to Mexico, is a story of encounter. It builds by the stories of thousands of brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers, and children whose faces bear the weight of the extreme abuse of corrupt and failed society. Families who are desperate for escape. Ayúdame, help me. This is what I hear. These cries from women, men, and children stir me to action daily. Their pleas for help push me always to do more. Our work on the border has allowed me the opportunity to reach a larger audience where I bring to light the stories of the people who I am encountering every day. I make sure the world notices the people who are struggling in our midst, people I encounter every day. When I speak, I want to make sure the world notices them. Every day we welcome many families with amazing women who I am privileged to accompany in their journey, to fight for the right to life of their children. Women who face all kinds of adverse and abusive treatment by a selfish and corrupt society. It is now that we urgently need to respond to what is happening in our world today. We must join with others as we take action to care for humanity. I'm amazed at the power we women bring to what is happening in our world today. Just last night is a good example. We received a call from a woman in law enforcement, from a border patrol agent. She was speaking with another nurse, a woman who worked in a hospital. They needed our help with a woman who was pregnant and had to be taken to the hospital for special care. The mother had 2 children with her, a 7-year-old little girl and a 5-month baby. They called us with the hope that we could help her care for the mother's children while she was in the hospital. It was urgent and it was very late. Rosa, our coordinator who oversees the humanitarian center, received the call. She is an amazing woman, committed unconditionally to care for the immigrant families. She calls me to talk about how we can help this mother with her children. We asked the mother from our local community who volunteers every day at our center if she could receive and take care of the children for the day while the mom was at the hospital. Her response was immediate with a yes. We decided it was best to ask a woman who was staying at our center, and she's there now, and was there, and she has been there for an extended period of time because she was a victim of human trafficking and had to stay there and to be witness that she was awaiting court of the traffickers. She immediately agreed to care for the children while the children's mother was in the hospital for this day. What happened last night with all these women coming together to help a mother needing help is something that often happens every day here at the border. It is a powerful presence of women coming together to care for humanity. It is stories like this that I can share with the world when I speak. Stories of life, about real people, and of the heroic response from women. Sharing stories after story of the resilience of women who we encounter each day at the border. Women who, against all odds, are able to not break in despair of abuse after abuse, being able to hold strong, defending and protecting their children. I am also amazed at the women I encounter at every stage, whether a volunteer or a refugee. Demonstrates what is possible when we empower ourselves to stand up and uphold the human dignity of the thousands of immigrant families passing through our Rio Grande Valley here in South Texas. Women like Esperanza Gelman, who didn't think twice when responding to my call back in 2014 to meet me at the Sacred Heart Church in McAllen, Texas, as she asked only, "What are we doing?" And I said, "I'm not sure. Just call your friends, pick experiences on their journey." Other women spend hours helping families into the wee hours of the night, taking families into their home to sleep at times, and then bring them back in the morning so they don't miss their bus. Herminia Forsaggi, who faithfully spends hours at the refugee center, and each refugee she meets, she would say, "No one should be allowed to cry alone." So she made sure to cry with them, making their pain hers and showing them their life matters. All of these women have been true champions in responding with love and compassion to the immigrants at the border. They are the faces of women upholding human dignity today in our time. These are the women from the border who lift me up each day with their example of truly witnessing God's presence in their lives. These women and thousands more like them respond with generosity, not expecting any credit for their services, only the pleasure of knowing that the families and the children are safe and are now in a better place. The pandemic has given me the opportunity to be more available to the families, visiting the refugee camp at the border in Mexico. Immigrant families have to encounter a wall of resistance from entering into the United States. And they find themselves having to wait in Mexico in conditions beyond what anyone could imagine a family, a mother, a child could be in. And yet they are there, suffering. Thousands just waiting, hopeful that someday they may be allowed to enter into the United States. Some consider the possibility of attempting to cross almost daily, risking their lives with the hope that maybe this time I will make it. I recall a young mom who was waiting in Matamoros just across from the border in Mexico, and she was there with her husband and Chuito, her little 2-year-old boy. She was pregnant, almost 9 months. Every day I saw her, I couldn't believe how pregnant she was. Immediately I would say to her when I would see her, Consuelo, ¿ya? And her response was, Todavía no, madre, not yet. She knew that she needed to wait till the very last moment possible, because if she attempted to cross with her family before she was in her labor pains, the probability was that they would be sending her back to Mexico. So she waited and waited to the very last minute. One early morning, I got a call from them. Her husband called me to say, Ya madre, it's time. The mom could barely walk. With great pain, she managed to get as close to the river, and right before they got into the water, she fell to the ground as her baby came out. Women from the camp rushed to help her and surrounded her, picking the baby up and wrapping it in cloths. Consuelo, crying, asked if her baby was okay. Her dream of crossing to the United States was shattered. Yet at the same time, the joy of seeing her beautiful newborn in her arms brought her the peace she needed in those moments. Women's resilience against all odds is what we share with one another. It is our strength that lifts us to be who God is calling us to be. As a religious, I have found that God, through the guidance of my mentor in religious life, have learned to discover the me that I am today. There will be times when I needed to overcome the fear that held me back. I recall Sister Juliana Garcia, who was my mentor, often said, Norma, desempaquétate, unpack yourself. It was her way to say, Norma, be yourself. In other words, don't hold back from being you. Be true to yourself. Allow yourself to be. As women of today, I would encourage you to imagine yourself as a gift to the world. You need to unwrap the gift of yourself so that you can accomplish and be everything you're meant to be in our world today. So that you can be a voice for those who do not have a voice. So that you can offer help where help is needed. This is how we begin the work of justice. For we know too well that if there is no justice, there will be no peace. As Mother Teresa of Calcutta said once, the world is changed by our example and not by our opinions. As you give the best of yourself, your example will help bring out the best in others. We urgently need this today. People who are willing to bring out the best in each other. People who can transform misunderstanding and anger into compassion and caring. People who will build up our communities with actions of love. What we are living today requires that we ask ourselves, how should I respond to what is happening? Today, we are not sure who to believe or what to believe. We are unsure what to do or not to do. But we need to be advocates and speak out to the world. I find that as women of faith, we are guided by our God as our moral compass that moves us forward in all that we must respond and do. If you are a person of faith, God must be at the center of who you are. You will allow yourself to be guided in every step so that the Holy Spirit can guide us. It is the Spirit of God that will make you feel the fire within, to act and to speak, to not be afraid. It will free you so that you are not paralyzed and indifferent, so that you do not ignore human suffering and injustice. It is the Holy Spirit that will define you as a compassionate servant leader, that moves you to be present at the core of what matters in humanity. As you take courage and have the confidence in yourself to trust God present in you, I encourage you to get close to people, listen to them, be present to them, find out where you are needed. It is only when we allow ourselves to get close enough to see and to feel, it is only then that we will care more deeply, that we will be people of action, people of God. There is so much suffering in our world, and emotions are picked to extremes. Each of us has experienced and witnessed these extremes in one form or another. But I urge you to focus on being people who bring light to the world. For we cannot move forward falling into the traps of the false narratives that may paralyze us. Our world desperately needs you to go above and beyond to greater heights that lift you to discover what brings us together to be one community, one people under God, respectful of all life, excluding no one. It is about being one, diverse and different in how we look, think, and believe. Yet in our own uniqueness, we are beautiful for who we are. We don't have to allow to all be the same to respect and care for each other. We are all created special and sacred with so much to offer. It is our diversity that makes us strong. It is now that you must define what is at the core of who you are. It starts every morning when you open your eyes. The very first thing you do is smile at God and say, "Thank you, God, for today. Holy Spirit, be with me all day. In the midst of all the confusion and anger and distrust and pain, suffering, there is hope. Today, you are that hope. You just need to believe and say, here I am. Aquí estoy. Today, I see our world weeping. The pandemic has made us aware how vulnerable and fragile we are as human beings. The virus continues to attack all aspects of who we are, limiting our freedom to do so many things we took for granted. Many have lost loved ones. Others suffer from illnesses, economic crisis, and so many other hardships have surfaced because of COVID-19. The abuse of force and racism has unleashed uncontrolled violence and hatred in our world. Most find themselves fearful of who to trust, who to believe. It appears as if our world is destroying itself. Hatred and anger are at extreme levels. There is an urgent need for a response to all of this, a response that brings everyone together to take part in a better tomorrow, a better today. As women in our world, you are the hope for today. You can make a difference in the restoration of the spirit of our communities. You can help them heal from brokenness. You will be key in weaving together with other women strong lines of unity in our communities. Pope Francis has ignited a revolution of tenderness that we all can be part of. We can only allow not to be afraid, not to hide the tenderness within, letting it be at the center of who we are and what we do, making possible, as Pope Francis says, the miracle of kindness that needs to be in the center of stage as a shining star in the midst of all the darkness in our world today. Just trust God is with you and believe in the power of kindness. You can be that voice of hope to the world. It is you called to be an advocate, to speak out your story of kindness to the people around you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Norma, for sharing your shining hope with us, and of course, your incredible and really life-affirming experiences on the border. I'm particularly struck, I have to say, by your call to be heralds of truth, because the difficulty and the danger often of speaking truth to power is one of the big challenges that sisters have shared with us since this project was launched last year. And I have to say that for me personally, a huge motivation to be part of Sisters Advocating Globally is the sense that this project can support sisters to find strength in numbers, and not just in numbers, but in transcending borders and connecting with a global community that's working towards a better world. So thank you for your inspiration and the power of your hope.
Thank you.
On that note, we're going to take a couple of minutes just to digest all of the inspiration and the input that we've received so far, and also to give our wonderful translators a little break time to take a breath. But please don't go away, because I'm going to send now in the Zoom chat a very short contact form that you can fill in if you want to receive updates from the project, and if you want to hear about our events and training opportunities. I'm going to copy it into the chat right now. There it is. So I'm going to give us just a couple of minutes silence and respite while you fill that in if you want, and we will be back in approximately 90 seconds. Thank you. Okay, so I think we'll kick off again, as we have lots more inspiration to come and no time to waste. We're a couple of minutes ahead of schedule, which is wonderful. So without further ado, our next speaker is Sister Angela Reed, Head of Mercy Global Action, the Justice Arm of the Mercy International Association. Welcome, Sister Angela. Sister Angela is a graduate of the School of Global, Urban and Social Studies at RMIT University in Melbourne, Australia, where she completed a PhD on human trafficking. While living in the Philippines, Sister Angela focused her research on giving voice to Filipino women who'd been trafficked for sexual exploitation. Previously, she was a lecturer for the Master of Social Work at RMIT University and a coordinator at a women's safe house in Melbourne, where she encountered many women and children who were experiencing violence and abuse. Over the years, Sister Angela has integrated her professional background in education, social work, and theology to adopt an interdisciplinary approach to research, service provision, and public advocacy. Her main area of focus is gendered violence and particularly human trafficking. Sister Angela, thank you for joining us from Australia.
Sorry, Julia, the interpreters ask the speakers to speak a little bit slowly, including yourself.
Of course, I shall practice what I preach. Sorry about that.
Thank you so much, Julia. And I hope I can speak slowly enough for the interpreters, not only to pick up the English, but the Australian accent. So I want to begin by saying thank you to the speakers, the sisters who spoke before me. Sister Norma, I'm very touched by the way you spoke about the people you work so closely with. And I felt very much you are a storyteller. And I like to think that I'm a storyteller too. And it's only through the art of storytelling that much of our advocacy can take place. I'm going to share my screen now. Is that okay? Wonderful. So I'm really going to take the time to speak about women's advocacy as a prophetic act of, just got to move, a prophetic activity of the church. Oops, sorry, I'm having a little bit of trouble moving my presentation along. So for just this small amount of time this morning, I'm going to talk about what I understand as advocacy and present the Mercy advocacy model, as well as share some resources from the Mercy Global Action Office, of which I head up, and then ways to move forward. So what do we mean by advocacy? There have been many definitions today and I found them really helpful. I'm going to share one from the World Council of Churches that came out of their meeting in 2009. And they state advocacy is a prophetic activity of the churches in which we accompany and support our sisters and brothers who struggle mightily for justice and peace in the context of injustice and violence against fellow human beings and the rest of creation. Advocacy involves speaking up for those who are silenced, and I heard that so clearly from the sisters who've spoken before me. In efforts to rectify injustice, it demands our engagement with the issues and initiatives of those who struggle for life, justice, equity, rights, and peace. Advocacy is indeed a mission activity of the church in the world, and it's one way in which the church participates in its ongoing mission. Sister Joan Chittister, who has also been mentioned before, a wonderful prophet of our day, I believe, says what this world needs most from us right now is commitment to a spirituality that is prophetic as well as private, that echoes the concerns of the prophets who have gone before us. She says, while we keep our heads down, our mouths closed, our public reputations unblotted, thanks to the silence we keep in the face of great public issues of the day, the pillars of society erode in front of us. She says, the silence is deafening as the world waits for those on the edge of the crowd to speak up, to speak out. And I'm so reminded of the woman at the well, speaking up and speaking out, and drawn to that image very much as a woman advocate. Anne Lamont, an American writer, describes what she believes is mercy. And of course, that's particularly relevant for me and my congregation as a Sister of Mercy. I'm going to read you what she describes as mercy. And I wonder if you could think about advocacy also being the same as mercy. So she says, mercy means compassion, empathy, a heart for someone's troubles. It's not something you do. It is something in you, accessed, revealed, or cultivated through use, like a muscle. And so I sometimes say, how's your mercy muscle? Sometimes it feels stronger some days than others. So I want to just share Mercy Global Action is the office that I head up, and this is the social justice arm of Mercy International Association. And we're located in New York, opposite the United Nations headquarters. And our work involves working with the United Nations, but also with many other international organisations, and of course working together in coalitions with many religious and many faith-based organisations, as well as others that hold similar values. In 2016, the Sisters of Mercy, in the Year of Mercy, declared by Pope Francis, underwent a process of reflection in which they undertook theological reflection in the light of social justice. And if you're interested in looking at this model further, you can go to the Mercy World website. What came up from the many reflections and discussion groups were many, many issues. We've named them today and we could keep on naming them. You can see that they're issues of displacement of persons and degradation of earth. What we did as a justice unit was to work on the mercy, justice, advocacy approach. So you'll see here this graphic which shows the importance of the experience of earth and people. Often people think, oh, advocacy is about taking banners in walks, writing letters and protesting and rallying. And yes, that is part of advocacy. But we can never, ever do any of that kind of work unless we are in close proximity to the people and earth. Reverend Barber of America talks about the power of proximity. And I couldn't help being reminded of that when Sister Norma was speaking. The power of proximity, never losing sight of the people with whom we work and walk alongside. And significantly, self-reflection. Once again, I heard Sister Norma say that she was asked to unpack herself. And I think that's such a good way of describing what self-reflection involves when we're working in justice. We have to unpack some of the preconceived ideas, assumptions and notions that are there. And sometimes we have to recognise our own position of privilege and really try and understand the position of those who are perhaps marginalised, discriminated, displaced. Alongside that, we have numerous tools for advocacy. And you'll see there that we've got all of those listed. And again, you can find those on our website. But who is advocacy for? Well, I think it's really important that we recognise that we work with, not for, those oppressed and those experiencing justice. One of the main challenges for me has been to bring the voice, particularly of women who have been trafficked, to the United Nations and to other international forums to talk about their experience and to give voice to their experience. Some images here that just represent some high-level meetings and then some really grassroots work, engaging with the people. We've undertaken over the last couple of years some significant research. Inherent Dignity, which is an advocacy guidebook that is steeped in the experiences of young women who have been trafficked for sexual exploitation. Our latest publication is Hope in a Time of Pandemic, which reflects on the work of Mercy throughout the world during COVID, and still very much with us, and acknowledges the many issues that have come out and been brought to bear in this time of pandemic. You'll notice we also have put out a publication on water and sanitation, recognising that all of these issues are interrelated. And then the publication I Have a Voice. All of these you can Google online and get, but the I Have a Voice is the actual words of women who have experienced trafficking. I'm conscious of time, so I'll finish up. But Melly Lenario, you'll see there is a survivor advocate of human trafficking, and she has spoken at the United Nations and has definitely, I believe, been empowered. And I really appreciated Sister Eilish's definition of empowerment, of giving strength and confidence to do something. And that's certainly been articulated by Melly. So back to finish with the wonderful wisdom of Sister Joan Chittister. Shall we do something to reshape the heart and soul of the worlds we inhabit? Or shall we do nothing and claim that we were powerless in the world? Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Sister Angela, for that beautiful presentation. I have to say I'm biased because my background is in communications, but I also feel strongly that advocacy is very much about storytelling. And I feel like it's such a privilege to be a storyteller in this world, not just so that we can tell our own stories, but also, as you said, to really raise the voice of those who are on the edge of the crowd, which I love as an image, and to advocate with them and not just for them, which is one of the key tenets of our project here at UISG. So thank you. I found that really inspiring.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So next, we're going to hear from Sister Donatus Lily, who's joining us today from Kenya. Hello, Sister Donatus. Sister Donatus of the Congregation of Our Lady of Charity of the Good Shepherd is the Vice Coordinator of Religious Against Human Trafficking and also a former designate to the UN's Economic Commission for Africa. Her academic background includes a bachelor's degree in pastoral counselling and a master's degree in counselling psychology, as well as qualifications as a therapist, trainer, and certified assessor for the Kenyan government. Her research activities in Kenya have focused on human trafficking, child marriage and forced marriage, and the deadly impact of fistulas. Sister Donatus has extensive experience supporting the inclusion of faith-based organizations in advocacy activities and raising awareness with grassroots communities across Africa. She's been involved in the adoption of the Global Compact for Migration and in efforts to improve African land ownership policies with a particular focus on addressing the root causes of migration and human trafficking. Sister Donatus, hello, and thank you for joining us. I don't think we can hear you. I don't know if that's...
Okay. Oh my God.
Brilliant, that's better.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry for that. I hope I'm audible enough.
Yeah, we can see your presentation. Could you please make it start the presentation?
Okay, thank you. You can see the presentation now?
Yes, can you make it as a presentation?
All right, let me try.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, sister.
Okay, yeah. Thank you so much, Guilia, for that. And I'm so honored really to join this forum today. And I just want to echo the words of Sister Sheila about gathering information and linking with non-state actors to help us connect globally and make us have impact in the world of today. So I came up with just these few points that advocacy is fitting into the life, has to be fitting into the life and mission of religious women. And with this, generation after generation, religious life was seen as a prayer tool and remedy for every issue. And these religious congregations were formed and delivered services in silos within their convents and monasteries. This led to a duplication of services, and thus our impact was hardly felt in a consumerist, competitive world that has led to abuses of human rights. While each congregation continues to offer service in alignment with its charism, the mantra for the UN agenda to meet the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals is leave no one behind. The church, and especially the religious, cannot be left behind working on their own silos. To increase their impact, the religious ought to adopt synergies and galvanize more efforts in lobbying our states to adopt just laws and policies that consider the less fortunate and provide access to justice. Furthermore, we have been called by the Holy Father to stand with the marginalized, not being their voice, but rather building capacity for them to voice their own concerns about their dire situation. This is a universal call, and many congregations have come up together to form coalitions such as the Religious Against Human Trafficking, the Talitha Kum, Santa Martha Group, and many others. The church has realized that it's no longer the time for Moses and Aaron to continue being mouthpieces for the vulnerable. It's now time to pass on the mantle, enabling the vulnerable to state their issues. It is time to realize that dishing out money and food is not the solution, but rather empowering individuals to voice their own solutions. Permit me at this onset to share some advocacy strategies that may help us going forward. These equally are my own recommendation for us as religious orders that will enable us to survive in a global world of consumerism so that we can make impact in future generations. The first is linkages with the UN. In this, congregation can be accredited as observer states or accredited with special status. And in this, it helps the congregations to be able to make statements wherever it is necessary. And this also includes the United Nations Environmental Program. First, to member with the social protection flows. We have the global social protection, which trickles down from the global right into the national. And in this helps congregations to develop social laws and policies together with their states that factor in gender equality in all spheres of life, and also issues to do with grant transfers for the aged, the vulnerable children, orphans, and persons with disabilities. We could also be members with women media groups and NGO media groups that are also accredited to UN. And this helps us to participate in regional consultations, development of regional and national position papers on thematic areas, issues to do with food security, gender equality, and many others. On the capacity of the human rights mechanism, we could also participate in treaty bodies like the Convention on the Elimination of Discriminations Against Women, that's CEDAW, the famous CEDAW, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the Convention on the Migrants and their Families. We could also participate in the Universal Periodic Reviews, and this is a state-driven, but we can also develop reports so that these reports can be featured during the reviews in a particular situation. And that helps in lobbying member states to ratify national and international agreements that they have not ratified, and also participate in the Global Compact for Migration that was adopted in Morocco 2018. That the Global Compact Migration has 23 objectives, and among those, we have objective 2.5 that are very key, that help states to work on issues that drive persons live from their own countries to other countries in search for better pastures. And now I would like to share my very personal experience. I've been involved in the linking grassroots ministries in 10 African countries and 3 islands, Reunion, Mauritius, and Madagascar. I was involved in helping Mauritius develop the Voluda National Reviews during the VNL, which was presented to the high-level political forum. I also participated in the review for Kenya in 2017 and 2020, together with other non-state actors and the region, the national designate. I was involved in the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals, focus being on sustainable development, creating awareness within ministries, and developing focal points and conduct towards contribution of the VNR for Voluda National Reviews. Being a member of the women media groups, which I've just mentioned, and this helps in developing of position papers as a region, but not as a region as such, also bringing in the voice of the person in the grassroots. And also I personally attended the high-level political forum in 2017, and we were involved in making a presentation on side events, working from development of papers and involvement of moving from poverty to prosperity. And that is something that is also ongoing. And also I contributed my past experience in gender equality during the Commission on the Status of Women for 62, and also later in the Regional Generation Equality Forum held in Addis Ababa in 2019, and actually was the key speaker for the faith state actors within Africa, bringing in the voice of all the religions. Of course, it's something quite major, but just touching a few things. And also, of course, I was involved in issues of human rights mechanism in Geneva during the review for Kenya. That was 2017. And so it was the issue of fistula for women and girls. And of course, harmful practices. So these are just the developing of written statement, oral statement, and also as a joint forum. And on adoption of the GCM, which I've just mentioned. And just to say something, again, in the regional, African regional forums for sustainable development goals. And in this way, this is the structure that the Religious for Good Shepherd have been working on. And this is something very important. We can begin like we have a regional congregational representative to the UN, then that trickles down to a regional designate in each region. And then it goes down to a country representative. And in that way, all the sisters involved in the ministries, their voices, whatever they are doing is heard. So it is bringing right from the grassroots, helping the women, the girls that we are working with to voice on their ideas, other than us doing it for them. Thank you so much. Back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Donatus, for sharing your incredible breadth of experience with us and for really giving us an overview of what advocacy can be, what it means to advocate, and how we can take action as advocates at a regional level and at a global level as well. And thank you for reminding us again that advocacy is about empowering others, about a hand up, as we say, and not a hand out. So we're going to move into a more interactive part of this session now. And before we open the floor to our audience at large, I'd like to give Sister Donatus and Sister Angela the opportunity to ask any questions of each other if they'd like to. If there's anything that you'd like to expand on, if you have any thoughts on the presentations that have just been shared, then please feel free to take the microphone now.
Okay, will I go ahead?
Go for it, yes.
Thanks so much, Sister Donatus. We have met each other in New York. It's great to see you online, and thank you so much for what you shared. I am in awe of all the work you do at such a high level, and as well as keeping so closely in contact with the grassroots. I'm wondering, when you talk about all the different like high-level political forums and the UPR process in Geneva, how do you maintain a sense of hope in what must so often feel overwhelming in terms of processes to you?
Thank you so much, Angela, for that comment. And really, it's very key. First, let me say it is quite overwhelming in the first place. But second, there's beauty because I did not work alone. I worked until 2020. I was not working alone. I was actually linking the national representatives together with the global, and me being the middle person. And of course, I would get into the grassroots, like in every country, there's a national representative. And so I would be very much on lookout to see when a certain state is being reviewed. So I would see when is the deadline and when they're supposed to submit the written papers or that report. And in that way, I was also linking with the human rights representative in Geneva. So that helps so much. So what helps so much, let me say, it is the partnership, not my work, but the work of the congregation, not the work of the congregation, but the ministries whereby the sisters are involved so that they bring the voices of that. So I would be involved in the national, if it's about collecting data, helping the sister develop the data, the information, if it's like South Africa, Mauritius, and Egypt, and Sudan, then together would form
We've lost connection momentarily.
How to participate. So then again, sending the report is not enough. There's the need to send the report, but also follow up. So that's why I personally attended the Universal Periodic Review, knowing that if there's a report, that is a key issue that is within the country.
We're struggling, I think, with our connection.
During this review, they are very lenient to each other. Like I take, for example, if it is Kenya being reviewed, and it's a time for Uganda, which is within East Africa, to give their comment, they'll just say, continue the good work you are doing. Actually, that makes no impact. And that's where we really need to be there to say, no, it's not to continue the good work you are doing, it's point out and say, work on this and give it a timeline. So it's not just about working on it, it's give it a timeline. And within a cycle of 4 years, the same states are supposed to be reviewed. So the observatory statement and recommendation, they are the ones to be given out. So within a period of 2 years, they are supposed to say, this is what we have done. For example, for CEDAW, Kenya was being reviewed and the issue of the trafficked persons. So it was about building houses for these women, because like in Kenya, we didn't have any for the state. We have some, but for NGOs and faith-based organizations. But for some of the NGOs, they would be just like a way of looking for fundraising, not so much as quality delivery. So in that way, we help the country know that, yes, it's not only that state that is giving recommendation, as we have also developed a report and we are supposed to follow up. And that's why it is taxing, because after we have to come back as NGOs, you cannot work on silos, but as NGOs and develop joint report and say, okay, our country, how far have you gone? This is what you have done. We thank you for that. How can we come in again? Again, it's not only tasking them, but complimenting them, but pointing out the loopholes and letting them know that our eyes are wider than theirs. And that is why we have the African statement by Chinua Achebe that says that if a cockroach wants to govern the chicken, it must employ the frog to be its bodyguard. You know what that means? The country, like us as faith-based, we are so few. As congregation, I can't do it alone. And I cannot, sometimes it's very hard, because if it is a individual statement, the state may not take it very serious. But if it is a joint statement, and that's why now we bring in the human rights mechanism to say, this is what is happened. Like the issue of the human trafficking, that's already what we are doing. Thank you so much, Sister Angela. And surely we met, and I hope we met in the future.
Thank you so much. And it's so obvious that you want states to be accountable, not only for the human rights mechanisms to be there, but for their account. You are, really calling them to account is what I hear you saying. So yeah. Not easy.
Yeah, not easy. And thank you.
Sorry, Sister Donatus. I'm going to cut us off briefly because I know we have another short scheduled break for the translators at this point. And I do want to open the floor as well to questions from the audience. So I think what we're going to do now is we're going to take just 1 minute for people to start sending their questions to Sister Donatus and to Sister Angela, or general questions for the session in the Zoom chat. And Patrizia will moderate the Q&A for us. So thank you very much, Patrizia. We probably won't have time for many questions, unfortunately, but we will be saving all the questions in the chat to read through them later, because we really do want to hear everyone's thoughts on advocacy in general and today's topics in particular. We may try and answer a few more questions through the next UISG newsletter, for example, or perhaps even in a future session. So if you have any questions, please do send them in the Zoom chat now. We're going to take a 1 minute pause, and then Patrizia is going to start us off with the Q&A. Thank you.
Julia, I think while we wait for some questions to arrive, there is one for Sheila, and I have one which is general, so perhaps Angela or some other speakers can just comment. I think it's important to highlight which is the role of the sisters who do not work directly at the advocacy level. So which is the role of the sisters at grassroots level for the advocacy? And for Sister Sheila, if she can give us more details on the training program on advocacy. So I think we can start with two questions. Thank you.
Great. Shall we ask Sister Sheila then to answer the first practical question?
Let me just say this much about that. The training program is with Julia. I mean, Julia, you're the one that's the advocacy coordinator. We will be working with them. They will be doing specific training, but we will be looking at the areas out of where we need to be doing advocacy work and the different kinds of trainings that would be helpful. This is a program still in formation. I'm being brought in and learning what it is about. So I'd have to say Julia has to answer that question because it's not at this time in my purview, I guess I could say.
Yes.
If I could answer it, I would, but I'm not able to.
You're right, Sister Sheila. I should have said the training program on advocacy is something that we're working on in collaboration with the Laudato Si vision and, of course, the vision for the Laudato Si platform, onboarding religious around the world. So it's something that we're hopefully developing throughout the summer with Sister Sheila, and we'll be launching at some point in the new academic year in October, perhaps. So details are to be confirmed, but certainly what we want to do as the advocacy project at UISG is really build capacity for sisters to know how to go out and advocate on whatever they want. So it won't be a training program that kind of teaches advocacy on specific topics. It'll be more of a toolkit, I think it's fair to say, something that can really enable sisters to go out and do their best work independently, autonomously. And I wonder if Sister Angela would like to answer Patricia's general question, which I second, because it's a big question for us as part of the kind of work that we've done in this first year on the advocacy project. How do we link the work that we're doing on advocacy at a regional level and at a global level with the efforts of sisters who perhaps aren't ready or don't have time, or don't have the kind of at the moment the wherewithal to be involved in, for example, policy making or research, but are concretely active on the ground in all these areas that we're advocating around. How do we link the activism to the advocacy is how I would describe it, and it's a question that I've really been struggling with in a productive, creative way, but it's a tension that's there. How do we bring those things together?
Well, I can attempt to answer it, and it won't be a full answer. But what I believe is that, and I've heard this said so many times from sisters throughout the world, like, oh, I don't have time to do advocacy. First of all, I want to say they are advocates every single day, that they are practicing advocacy in their work with groups or women and so on. One of the ways that we've tried to really involve our sisters and Mercy Associates throughout the world is to gather the stories. And like I said at the beginning about storytelling, nothing I think is more compelling than the stories. And so wonderful to have the stories firsthand from the women themselves or the people who are experiencing injustice, and for somehow the practitioner, if you like, or the sister working in the ministry, bringing those people forward and empowering them in the real sense of empowering. So I do believe there is no advocacy without that grassroots engagement. And so, as I said, an incomplete answer, but off my head, that's where I'm heading.
Thank you. Yes, and I think the idea that storytelling is that link between the grassroots and the kind of global advocacy. Again, I'm biased, but I really couldn't agree more. I don't know if Patricia has received any other questions in the chat, or I mean, we're doing well on time, but not that well. So we could move on.
There is another question for Donatus and Sheila. I don't know. I can read it. I don't know if we have time to answer. In your advocacy with and for human trafficking victims, some people said that it's time to focus on how to empower survivors of human trafficking, not on how they are exploited. What do you think?
Perhaps I could answer this one.
Sure, briefly.
Thank you so much. And yes, it is time to empower the survivor. But I also believe that other than waiting until somebody is trafficked, then you can come to empower them, we need to take the very key areas, and it is sensitization, creating awareness into the grassroots. But very key important, like now, I'm a vice coordinator of the Religious Against Human Trafficking here in Kenya. What we have embarked on as objective one is creating awareness within our religious communities and also going into the grassroots. And we realize that the clergy is very important. If we want to go into the parishes, if we leave the clergy behind, then there's very little impact that is felt. So we are trying to bring the interfaith religious groups. We, like last 2 months ago, we had a workshop of trainers, trying to help them, give them the capacity to know how to identify a victim, a candidate that could be trafficked, and in that way, how to link with the governments. So we had also key representative from the government. The question is creating synergies, trying to bring everybody on board. We had the Muslim, the soup came in the faith. We had all groups, and they committed, they say, this actually they formed a work plan. In that I'm saying already individual organizations, some of them have these programs, like the shelter house, like the church, diocese, they have shelter house, but that is not enough because you don't have to wait. Let us create the awareness from the beginning. And in that way, we have less and less people that are trafficked. And also, like I talked of the Global Compact for Migration, we try to make our countries know that, yes, you adopted this and you signed. So what precautions are you taking? How are you implementing? So that at least they know that we can reduce this. It's a question of rotating around the sustainable development goals. Try to supply, to make sure they have, everybody has enough. It's not that they only choose to go out of their choice, not out of disparity. Thank you.
Right. Could I just say something? I just want them to know that I have experience in advocacy. I'm just becoming newer to this program that UISG has had. I've worked very much in domestic violence and sexual assault training and helping change laws, having women become aware that this is not acceptable, and also working in HIV/AIDS, helping to craft that legislation. So I'm just kind of becoming more involved in that area. The situation too about the trafficking, I know in Uganda, they're working on a program where they address their Catholic legislators because there's an international way that young people can leave their country for, like hotels, all these other businesses, but they're not reporting on those accurately. So it's this kind of information in terms of having them be accountable and saying, we want to know what's going on and offering young people employment so that they do stay in their country. So those are, but we have to go on to the next part, but I'm just saying there's a lot that we have to follow up with more conversations because this is, where we need to be in dialogue with one another. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Sheila, and thank you, Sister Donatus and Sister Angela. And it's really, well, wonderful to feel that there's such a kind of movement for connection. And as you were saying, Sister Sheila, for dialogue, and that's really what's, you know, the fuel that's powering this work that we're doing. So it's now time, unfortunately, as we come towards the end of this session, for our final speaker, who has sent us her video testimony from Manila in the Philippines. Sister Judith Pedasas is a Carmelite sister of charity and a member of the coordinating team for Talitha Cum in the Philippines. Since 2010, Sister Judith has campaigned against human trafficking and particularly the online sexual exploitation of children in dioceses and parishes around Manila. Sister Judith devotes her time to raising awareness of trafficking, exploitation, and also teen pregnancy in schools, youth groups, and slum areas. And since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, she's taken her outreach directly to women and children at risk who are living on the streets, in illegal settlements, under city bridges, and even in Manila North Cemetery. So let's hear from Sister Judith.
The meeting on December 6, 2009, that I attended with the religious sisters in Washington, D.C. to end human trafficking was a wish granted to get involved with women and children advocacy. With this group, I committed myself to do the room-to-room campaign, giving awareness against human trafficking in the 3 public high schools in Tagaytay City. And why in the public schools? Because they offer free education, and majority of the students are coming from poor families. And why in Tagaytay City? It is a tourist spot. It is where I was assigned as one of the 3 Vedruna sisters running the shelter called Tahanan Vedruna. Tahanan is a Tagalog word for home. So it is a Vedruna home for poor, abandoned children and rescued from the abuses and exploitations of parents and relatives. When I came back to the Philippines on January 2010, I approached the 3 school administrators of the 3 public high schools. After reading my letter of request, allowing me to do the room-to-room campaign, I was so surprised by their reaction. This is what the students need to know, sister, and you are the right person to inform them, for we ourselves do not know about it. I started campaigning on February 10, 2010, giving priority to graduating students because the school year ended in March 2010. I was given 28 classrooms with 55 to 60 students in its classroom to give a 1-hour talk using the time for values education subject. In the beginning, I had no PowerPoint to present, no video to show about human trafficking, how to get the attention of the inattentive students. I gave a short information about human trafficking as a high-profile crime, a billion-dollar industry. I addressed to them that human traffickers are selling persons, preferably children and young people like you, because you are the most vulnerable members of the society. So the reason why I am here, to prevent you from becoming victims. We want you to be aware, to be alert, to be saved, because we care for you, we love you, and God loves you. You are precious. With this, I got their attention. This short information was followed by the true story of our neighbor, a 15-year-old beautiful girl, Lisa, who was recruited to work as an entertainer and dancer in Japan. So she was brought to Manila. Her mother, knowing I was assigned in Manila, requested me to look for her daughter. She gave me the address. I was apprehensive because the street is famous for having a belt of red houses. I was a young junior sister then, so a Spanish sister accompanied me. The house is big with high concrete fences. We were allowed to enter by the guard when he saw the veiled sisters. Lisa came down to meet us. Unusual for a teenager to wear black evening gown with traces of lipstick on her lips at 7 o'clock in the morning. So her work would have just ended early in the morning. No matter how we convince her that her mother is so worried that we are giving scholarship so she can continue her studies and find better job in the future, she said no. She was decided to go to Japan after 2 weeks rehearsal. She went to Japan, worked in the bar. The bar owner made her his second wife. Lisa became the owner of the bar. She built a house, the biggest in her hometown. She went home to visit the family and recruited her sisters, cousins, and neighbors to work in her bar. So this is a typical vulnerable victim of human trafficking who turned into a typical human trafficker, alluring young people to become rich. After the talk, one of them commented that human trafficking is a reality, not just what he saw on TV or movie. Other students said they were moved to share what human trafficking is to their family, friends, relatives, and to the group of young people. After doing this campaign alone, the program officer of Women and Gender Committee joined in this campaign in August 2011. In February 2012, I accepted the invitation of Talitha Kum Philippines, one of the mission partners of the Association of the Major Religious Superiors in the Philippines. So I joined this group after seeing that we are having the same advocacy. In Talitha Kum Philippines, we were able to intensify our work, giving orientation and awareness seminars to the religious, priests, and sisters in the diocese. Church workers, lay leaders, and youth groups in the parishes, local government officials and staff in the districts, teachers, parents, and students in the schools. We broadened and strengthened our networking and partnership with the Philippine Government Agency, which is called the IACAT, Interagency Council Against Trafficking, which is under the Department of Justice. We joined the sponsorship with the Philippine Interfaith Movement Against Trafficking, or PIMA, in the celebration of International Day of Prayer and Awareness Against Human Trafficking, together with a group from the Catholic Bishop Conference of the Philippines. Talitha Kum Philippines is in partnership with International Justice Mission, the IJM, which is more focused on the online sexual exploitation of children, which is OSEP. Talitha Kum Philippines, through the leadership of our active coordinator, we were able to help in organizing Talitha Kum Asia in Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Japan, Vietnam, Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, and still other countries are joining. Every month, online meeting is held, hosted by the assigned country of Talitha Kum members. I am very grateful to God, to the Unanima International, for inviting me to join the internship program, attending the conferences and assemblies about global issues on climate change, poverty eradication, socio and economic sustainability, human trafficking, and listening to the roundtable discussion, joining rallies and events inside and outside of the United Nations. This internship program gave me a global view of human trafficking. And thanks also to the Talita Kum International Coordinator, Gabriela Botani, for accepting me to join the first Talita Kum leadership training in Rome in 2018-2019. I was able to have enough time to analyze the biggest problem in the country, making Philippines famous and the epicenter of the crime, online sexual exploitation of children. In analyzing the root causes and effects, Talita Kum Philippines was able to focus in partnership with International Justice Mission on giving awareness and education to the residents in the slum areas, illegal dwellers under the bridge and cemetery, schools, small districts, remote areas where the indigenous people are in the southern part of Philippines, and to the religious sisters and church workers. We give additional topic on teen pregnancy to the high school students and young people, especially in the slum areas. For Philippines is the #1 in Southeast Asia with the highest number of teenage mothers. Thank you.
Wonderful to hear from Sister Judith and to have her vivid insight into the work of Talitha Kum networks on the ground. And so Sister Judith concludes our lineup for today. And in just one moment, I'm going to hand the microphone back to Sister Sheila, who's going to wrap up the meeting for us. But before I do, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to all of you for joining us. And of course, especially to our speakers, our inspirational, affirmative, wonderful speakers. We're so grateful for your time and for everything that you've shared today. Of course, thank you to Patricia, to Therese, to Anna, to our brilliant translators, to our partners at the Global Solidarity Fund, and to everyone who's worked at or with UISG to make this session possible. It's been a pleasure. Finally, I want to remind you that the next and last session of this Sisters Empowering Women series will be on peace, and it's scheduled for September 29th. More details will follow. Patricia will be sending out newsletters and information to the UISG contact lists. So, Sister Sheila, I will say goodbye and hand it over to you just to, well, give us the final note of this beautiful session.
Well, I just want to thank everybody. I think we have started something really very, very important. Just listening to each other, we see that we have many pieces that we can offer to make an integrated whole that can be dynamic. So I thank you for coming and being a part of this new frontier where we have to be listening to one another, be engaging in dialogue, looking at, as Sister Ellis did, let's look at what we've been doing in education and reaching out to others in simple ways to be advocates. And Sister Norma really raising up the power of the story. You know, that was what the scripture's about. And, you know, our stories are as sacred as those stories. So raising that up. And then bringing Sister Angela with the tools of the Mercy Sisters. They're very leader in many, many ways, bringing those tools forward and so willingly sharing those with us. That was so helpful. And Sister Donatus getting out there and giving the story straight and center and bringing in all of the people who have been a part of you in one swell soup, just bringing them together and allowing us to know that we need to be a part of this. We got to be strategic bringing it forward. And Sister Judith, you know, with the young people and trying to say, let's give a future. And that her story was, I mean, continuing to tell and to teach that story and invite others to say, this needs to be in this country and that country. No one is going to be left behind. So we need to be together. We need to keep in dialogue. And I look forward, this is my initiation, I look forward to ongoing conversations as we do so. Hope for the planet. And we continue with Advocacy Action Platform that includes everything that we're doing, not taking it away, but raising up what you're doing, you know, at the level of the church, you know, at the level where we have influence. We need to be there for each other because, as Pope Francis very well says, the whole is greater than the parts, even the sum of the parts. And what we've seen here this afternoon was a very dynamic whole when each of us gave our very best and promise for a future to work together. So thank you, Julia, for planning all of this and for allowing me to be a part of it at this time. So God bless you, and we will be in this together. In the same boat, we either sink or swim, and you know what? We're going to make it together. Thank you. Okay.
We unmuted all the microphones. Todos los micrófonos están abiertos.
Thank you. Take care.